Now welcome to another lightning response video where this time I'm going to try to do several questions and I'm going to immediately kick it off with this one from a lone battle droid who asked, Hey Thor, how do you feel about Force Ghosts having an expiration date, I guess? I get why Timothy Zahn had Obi-Wan and presumably Yoda pass on so they couldn't be Deus Ex Machina, but Lucas intended Force Ghosts to be the ultimate immortal state a Jedi could achieve through proper training and enlightenment. So to have them simply fade away feels like a waste. And I absolutely understand from a story point of view why Timothy Zahn started out Heir to the Empire with Obi-Wan basically saying goodbye to Luke, that I am fading away, that my time here is done. Because when you have a being come from a non-linear place where they know past, present, and future, obviously they can solve every problem for you ahead of time. And when they don't solve a problem and something really, really bad happens, you have to wonder why didn't they solve that problem? Like in the sequel trilogy, why did none of the Force Ghosts ever come to Luke long before things really went downhill and warn him about Ben and tell him that Palpatine was still around and that he's building a fleet out in Exegol? And yes, you could make the argument that in the long run it all worked out anyway, that yes, the day was eventually saved, but not before a lot of people died and suffered. And so we have to ask, why did Yoda wait until he did in order to come to Luke, and why didn't he tell him a lot more about what was actually happening when he could still have made a difference? So anyway, I understand why Zahn had them fade away, and that explains why they're not around to save the day always, but I don't think they fade away necessarily. I don't think they are as free to do what they want as it seems to be. I think they have to go by the ebbs and flows of the Force as well. That could also explain why they don't just show up all the time and say whatever needs to be said to, again, using the example of Luke telling him about Palpatine or Ben or anything else. I think there might be rules that they have to abide by. They might even be self-imposed to a degree that, of course, the Force Ghost wouldn't just want to solve every single problem all the time, that people need to learn and grow on their own. Though, yes, when you have billions of people dying in a war, you would think they might say something. But I do believe either the Force, somehow the ebbs and flows of the Force don't allow them to always intervene, or they are, again, self-imposed rules where they don't want to always intervene. We do have Obi-Wan saying to Luke in Empire Strikes Back that if you face Vader, you will do it alone. I cannot interfere. Now, does that mean I cannot because maybe there's the presence of the dark side and he can't be there around Vader? Does it mean he doesn't want to show himself to Vader and risk Vader learning about Force ghosts and all of that stuff, even though Anakin will become one? Or does it just mean this is a moment for you, Luke? I can't interfere in your big moment against Vader or your father, so I won't be there because I don't want to do that. I have to let fate decide. Anyway, I don't think they ever fade away. That's not what we learn anyway. We learn that they go to a realm, the cosmic force, and simply exist there in a place where time does not exist. Again, they are non-linear beings at that point. But I do think there's a good argument to be made that Force ghosts can't just appear to anybody at any time ever, that you might need a connection to the Force Ghost to be able to see them, which would be why at the end of Return of the Jedi, Luke is the only one who seems to see Yoda, Anakin, and Kenobi. That Leia stands right next to him and doesn't seem to see any of the three, though you'd think she would be able to see Kenobi after the Kenobi series and how they became besties there. But obviously Return of the Jedi was made before that, and, well, we don't have to necessarily worry about the Kenobi series. But anyway, to stop rambling and get to the next comment, I don't think they ever fade away. I just think they abide by their own set of rules and they realize that you can't just solve every problem, that yes, sometimes bad things need to happen so that people or the galaxy kind of in itself needs to learn and grow from them. And they really pick and choose their moments, and that eventually when no one is alive that remembers who they were, they do just kind of fade away into the background. Not like fade away literally, but more of a figurative, like I realize my time meddling in the affairs of mortal men is over. All right, moving on. The next question then comes to us from Z Spoke Scion. Probably saying that one wrong. My apologies. But they asked, Hey Thor, my question to you is, if you could ask George Lucas one question about Star Wars and he'd actually give you the truthful answer, what would you ask? Whether it be clarity on something that happens in the movies, elaborating on a philosophical aspect of the franchise, or even giving you a true hard outline for his versions of 7, 8, and 9, I'm curious what you'd pick. One question I've always wished I could ask is, did Mace Windu really outduel Palpatine in Revenge of the Sith, or did Palpatine stage the whole thing knowing Anakin would save him? Either outcome opens up so much to think about. I lean towards Palpatine letting him win, and his face as Windu is about to cut him down is him actually doubting his own plan for a second. Love to hear your thoughts on both. Keep up the great work. And even though there are a ton of things I would love to ask George Lucas about Star Wars, I think the one thing I would love to know the most is exactly how the Force works. And by that I mean the midi-chlorians and the wills and all of that. The stuff he kind of hinted at would have been in his sequel trilogy. So in a way, maybe I should just wish for the sequel trilogy, his sequel trilogy to have been made, or to ask him about that, and he'd probably explain it. But if I had to be very particular, I would ask, like, what is the deal with the wills? Why did you say they ride around in people like cars, and that the midi-chlorians are part of the microbiotic realm, which the wills are a part of, and they feed on the Force, and all of these things that he said rather recently or in the last few years about what his sequel trilogy would have been about? I would really just love to know the intricacies of the Force, how he sees how it all works, and what the mystery of the wills and all of that is, what they actually are, and what maybe they're trying to accomplish even, what their goal is, assuming they have one. Moving right along, we now have a comment from J.R. Mythical, who asked, Hey Thor, I'd love to see an episode where you answer this question. If you could tell any story in Star Wars, what would it be? If Disney wasn't a thing, you are the lead creative for a new story, what would you do? What era, what characters, what medium? Just a fun question, cheers. And what I would do, what I would love to see, and I don't know that this would go over well or be very popular or what other people would want to see, but I would do a story, probably a series, I'd put it on Disney Plus or whatever, about the Jedi as they should be. Just a story about a Jedi, or maybe multiple Jedi, going around the galaxy and encountering problems. It'd be a little like Star Trek, actually, but encountering moral dilemmas, you could say, and how they would approach them and how they would solve them. And I would have an overarching story. It's kind of like what I'm doing right now in my own little fan fiction, to plug my own stuff here. It would basically be, what would a Jedi do in these given situations? How would they respond and act, and how do they actually function? What do they actually believe? That sort of stuff would be gone into as well. But that's what I would do. I just want to see the Jedi as they actually should be. I want people to understand what the Jedi are actually all about, and maybe some of the misconceptions about them would begin to fade away. Okay, now we have another question here from Michael Smith, who asked, Hey Thor, I love your content and your videos. A couple questions for you. One, when did you become a Star Wars fan, and what makes you continue being a Star Wars fan today? My second question is, do you find that it's hard to watch Star Wars nowadays with all the division in the fandom? I understand gatekeeping, I understand that people don't like the sequel trilogies or any of the Disney Plus shows, but I was wondering, how do you continue to be a Star Wars fan with so much division and what feels like hate towards different sides of the fandom? Thank you, hope you have an awesome day, may the Force be with you. Okay, so first of all, and I know I've told the story before, I have been a Star Wars fan since I saw Return of the Jedi as a 5-year-old in the theater back in 1983. That is the moment that changed and shaped my life more than I ever would have imagined back in 1983. Anyway, how do I deal with all the division in the fan base and all of that? How do I stay a Star Wars fan when so many people seem to be angry? And I mean, for a lot of my time being a Star Wars fan, I was the only Star Wars fan I knew, and we didn't have the internet. I couldn't communicate with other people, be that on social media or Star Wars forums, which I discovered in the very late 90s and finally started to talk to other people. I mean, I know I've also talked about this before, but I read Heir to the Empire in 1991. I proceeded to read most, if not almost all, of the comics and books that followed that for the next decade, and I never once really talked to anybody about it in that time. None of my good friends were Star Wars fans. Again, there was no internet or any other way to talk to other people about Star Wars. Nobody cared about what I was saying. I couldn't just talk to friends and say, hey, I read this book, you want to hear about it? It was called Heir to the Empire. And so for a good portion of my time being a Star Wars fan, I was the only one. So the idea that, and I don't know if this is going to sound mean or cruel, but the idea that I would let other people shape my opinion now, that somebody getting very angry on the internet would somehow ruin my experience for Star Wars, it just doesn't compute with me. Again, this might sound harsh or not the way I want it to sound, but I don't really care if you don't like Star Wars or if you do like Star Wars. I mean, I care. I obviously like talking to my fellow fans. It's one of my favorite things to do, and something I wish I could have done way back in the 90s when I was reading all these books and comics and like, hey, this would be cool to talk about. But I guess the best way to put it is, I don't let my own personal enjoyment of something be shaped by someone else's disappointment in it or hatred of it. You can hate Star Wars. I say that all the time. I get comments all the time telling me how much they hate something I enjoyed, and or, something I really enjoyed. It's not real Star Wars. It's terrible. And I'm like, okay, I'm glad you feel that way. I'm not going to let that change how I feel about it. And in all honesty, when I make videos maybe critiquing Star Wars or criticizing it or even being very harsh towards it, I'm not doing that in order to make other people who enjoyed that particular piece of content hate it either. I'm just expressing my opinions, I'm having a conversation with my fellow fans, and we're just talking some Star Wars. That's what I'm here to do. I'm not here to be the authority on Star Wars. I'm not here to tell you how you should feel about it. I'm just telling you how I feel about it, and let's talk about that. That's kind of the goal of my channel since day one. It's still the goal of my channel to talk some Star Wars. And if you hate everything about it, that's fine. If you love everything about it, that's fine too. All right, I think that is going to be enough rambling for this time. Now it is your turn to take to the comments below and tell me about anything and everything I had to say. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you got questions for a future video? All you got to do is start your comment out with "Hey Thor," ask your question. I try to answer it in a future video. And again, I say try because I get tons of questions. I can't answer all of them. But either way, leave your questions or your comments below. Let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.